Today, boys and girls, we are going to be talking about the moral argument. Now, let me be clear. The moral argument is, this is what I've always argued, this is what every mainstream apologist argues, is that atheists cannot be good people. They're all either serial killers or axe murderers or... No.
But I was just...
No! Hey YouTube peoples, Stumma Smith here for the Unapologetic Apologists, and today I wanted to talk about one of the most common straw man arguments that I hear from atheists. Because you hear a lot, and it's one of the things I really wonder, because often when you watch Christians give a lecture, or theists, let's say theists, or, well, we could go with Christian apologists, because typically I have guys like William Lane Craig or Frank Turek in mind, or J. Warner Wallace, or Ravi Zacharias. But when you see them give a lecture, and they represent the atheist side, they usually either represent it very accurately, or even sometimes stronger than the atheists themselves would put the theory forward. And so typically when people who study under these guys enter into debates, I know this is true from my experience and friends of mine who are apologists, who I'm either with when they debate or they tell me about, they're more prepared. And when they're talking to the atheists, often they have to say, oh, you know, I understand the argument you're putting forth. In fact, let me put it a stronger way than you're putting it. But I don't see the same thing come from the atheist side, because when and trust me, I'm not in an echo chamber, so to speak. I don't just watch guys like William Lane Craig. I watch Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Michael Shermer's my favorite atheist out there. I have a lot of respect for the guy, and he's one of my favorite thinkers, but they often strawman their opponents. And so often, you know, the kind of internet atheist types who are studying the Richard Dawkinses and Sam Harrises and Steven Pinkers don't go and study the Christian apologists themselves. They go on what the atheists they're watching, like Richard Dawkins, are saying that the Christian apologists are saying. And it's often wrong. It's often based on a straw man. And that's what I see when I enter into my debates, you know, whether I'm at college or just, you know, at a friend's house, and we're debating about this kind of stuff, is they have this crude idea of what an apologetic argument looks like, and it doesn't accurately represent what we actually believe or the kind of things we actually argue. And a great example, if you want to look this up, is go on YouTube and look up Steven Pinker versus Nick Spencer on Unbelievable. And the entire time, Steven Pinker kept attacking straw man arguments. And in 95% of the cases, I don't think they got answered because it was actually off the topic that they were actually discussing. But anyway, so what I want to get into here is the straw man regarding the moral argument. And so if you're already familiar with the moral argument, then you probably already know where I'm going with this. If not, I'll link some videos in the description, videos that you can see other guys, you know, more famous apologists presenting the moral argument, because I'm not going to get too much into the moral argument here. But I am going to explain it a little bit. So the moral argument, in a nutshell, is that there is an objective realm of morality out there, that there are things that are really right and really good, regardless of what our opinion about it, regardless of human opinion. And there are things that are truly wrong or even evil, regardless of our opinion about it. And unless you have some standard outside of humanity, some source for morality above and beyond humanity to justify these things, then the moral truths that we hold are just subjective. They're just our opinion, right? And so the moral argument from the apologists is that leads to God. And I know what you might be saying. You might be saying, well, why does it have to be God? Well, I answered this in a previous video I did on the Euthyphro dilemma, which is there can't be just some Platonic form out there known as the good, right? Because morality is a property of persons, not things, right? So whatever the source of morality is has to be grounded in a person. And so this is best explained as a theistic God, because we don't have moral obligations to things, right only to people. So if there was just some abstract form, Platonic form out there known as the good, we'd be under no obligation to obey it or adhere to it. And so here's where the straw man comes in, though, because nothing I said there was that atheists can't be good people, or that atheists can't know right from wrong, or even that there are atheists out there that I never said that atheists can't be better people than people who claim to be Christians, right, or who do believe in God. But that's the straw man that they put forth. They always say, oh, so what, you're saying I can't be a good person without believing in God? I can't be a good person without religion, that I can't know right and wrong? Well, that's a stupid argument, because I do know right and wrong. And there are many atheists. There are many secular, say, organizations who do a lot of good. And that's all true. But they'll take that and say, so your argument's wrong. But that wasn't the argument. And I think one of the more popular examples of this is Christopher Hitchens used to say this a lot. He actually had a debate I remember it was a debate with Frank Turek. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the quote in front of me, but it was something to the effect of, how dare you suggest that without God, that I couldn't know right and wrong, that I would have no source for my morality, that I couldn't be a good person. And he'll say things too like, I put forth this challenge to you, name for me an action that a believer could act out or partake in that I couldn't as an atheist. But of course, that's a straw man. We're not saying that there are certain good things that only people who believe in God could do. And we're not saying that you can't know right and wrong, or that you can't be good without a belief in God. We're saying that you can't justify why it's objectively good regardless of our opinion if you don't have a standard that goes outside of humanity, that goes outside of human opinion. In fact, Frank Turek had to say this a lot. He'd say, Christopher, I'm not saying you're a bad guy. Christopher, I'm not saying you can't know right and wrong. I'm saying you can't justify morality. Now, of course, there is a more sophisticated form of this argument, which is that none of us could be good people not without belief in God, but without the actual existence of God, because in the absence of that standard outside of humanity, there is no such category as good. But I'm not going to get into that. So real quick, before I get into this, comment below. Let me know why you think that atheists strawman this argument before they attack it. And if you're an atheist and you're thinking, well, I don't strawman it, that's awesome. But I would like you to comment below and tell me why you think that other atheists, like Christopher, and Richard Dawkins, and even Sam Harris in some cases, get this argument wrong, why they strawman it. I'd love to hear from you. So here's why I think that this straw man constantly comes up. I think it's actually a miscommunication that's taking place. But real quick before I get to that, one thing it could be is it could just be the way the debate often gets structured. So for example, if a Christian apologist says, well, on atheism, why was what Hitler did objectively wrong? And so the atheist, and perhaps understandably in certain cases, takes that to mean, oh, so what, on atheism we should all be like Hitler? Or if I'm an atheist, I'm like Hitler. Well, that's stupid. And of course, that's not what we're saying. What the argument actually is there is, again, if we don't have a standard outside of humanity, if there's not a standard outside of Hitler, outside of me, and outside of you, then how is it not just our opinion versus his opinion? And you might say, well, we're on the side of the majority, right? The majority of humanity has decided that that's an evil that we're going to fight against, that we're going to progress against, that we're going to be defeated in a war. But of course, at the end of the day, the majority argument doesn't actually work, because, of course, what if Hitler had won World War II and brainwashed everybody into thinking that murdering Jews was right? And so the majority of people really thought that. Well, that wouldn't make it right. And so that's why you do need a standard outside of humanity. And let me add real quick, too, that of course, our argument isn't that if you're an atheist, then you're going to be like Hitler, right? Or you're going to be a bad person, or you're going to be a murderer, right? Because of course, then we couldn't even make the argument, right? Because when we make the argument, we're appealing to the atheist's moral intuition. We're appealing to the fact that the atheist we're talking to does know right and wrong, regardless of where he gets that. And so we couldn't even make the argument. So to be very clear, the argument is not that atheists can't be good people without God. It's that they can't justify why there is a category known as morality that holds true regardless of what we think about it or what our opinion is about it. But so here, this is what I want to get into real quick, which is why I think the straw manning is still happening, right? Because of course you could easily go on YouTube and you could look up Christian apologists giving the moral argument, and it's expounded on more than what I've put in here, but it's not the straw man version of the argument. So here's something I realized watching a debate between Frank Turk and Michael Shermer. During the Q&A, and they were debating on morality. During the Q&A, Frank Turek pointed out the difference between moral epistemology and moral ontology. So real quick, epistemology is how you know something, and ontology is why it exists, right? So moral epistemology is how you know morality. And so I can happily agree with the atheist that there are tons of ways we can know morality, right? Maybe we learned it through sociobiological evolution. Maybe our parents taught it to us. Maybe we kind of learned it from our peers in a social, working through school and whatnot. But those are sources of knowledge of the way we know right from wrong. But that doesn't explain why certain things are objectively right and wrong. And so that's the ontological question that the apologists are trying to answer, which is, okay, regardless of how we know morality, right? Why are those moral truths objective, regardless of human opinion? And what Frank Turk pointed out was that in Michael Shermer, throughout the entire debate, Michael Shermer's explanation of morality, which was based heavily on evolution, which was that we evolved and adapted to get this moral sense, and that we're moving on an arc of progress. Frank Turk pointed out that never got outside of the realm of epistemology. He never got into moral ontology, right? Because even if you grant Michael Shermer everything he's saying, you say that's 100% true, that we adapted to this moral sense, that explains how we know it, right? But that doesn't explain that. That doesn't explain how what we know is objective regardless of our opinion, because of course evolution can give different people moral senses. It gave Hitler his moral sense, right? So that's an epistemological question, which fair enough, you can give that to him, but that doesn't answer the ontological question. And so what I see happening in these debates is the atheist and the theist are actually having two different conversations. The atheist is on this plane talking about moral epistemology, and the apologist on this plane talking about moral ontology. And so the atheist is trying to use his epistemological theory to justify the ontological foundation. Right. So, for example, if you're Sam Harris and you say, okay, here's what I'm going to base my theory on. I want to reduce as much human suffering as possible. And so, and I want to increase well-being. And so the moral theory we're going to come up with, we're going to build on that, and we're going to be able to create a society in which we reduce as much human suffering as possible and create as much well-being as possible. And so you could even grant that to him and say, okay, fair enough. But that's just epistemology. That's just how we know it. And all of these naturalistic theories that I see never get outside the realm of epistemology. And so here's what I think happens, because the atheist is basically saying, okay, here's how we know right and wrong, epistemology. But they're using it to try to justify an ontological argument. And the apologist says, okay, but ontologically, that doesn't work. Ontologically, that doesn't justify morality. And so he refutes the theory. But so what's just happened in the atheist's mind is, I've basically said, well, your epistemological theory doesn't work, even though we're not using that language. And I think that's one of the problems. And so it's, well, you just destroyed my theory of how we know morality. So are you saying we don't know morality? And so I think this language needs to be crucially important in our future debates. I think we need to to push the atheist to say, okay, yeah, your theory is great if we want to figure out morality or explain how we know morality. And even if you disagree with the atheist that that's how you necessarily know it, excuse me, that we can still point out that that's just the theory of how we know it. That doesn't answer the ontological question. And even if you watch just like Sam Harris, I watched Sam Harris on Ben Shapiro's Sunday Morning Special, and what he was doing was he was giving an epistemological theory, but he was using ontological language. And I don't even think he realized that. He was saying, well, we need to reduce human suffering, for example. And so he'd say, so a society that doesn't have slavery, for example, is better than a society that does have slavery. Right? But what he's done there, when he uses the word better, he's now using his his epistemological theory and using ontological language, the ontological language of better, right? Because that assumes a standard outside of humanity. Because otherwise, the two societies, the one without slavery and the one with slavery, would just be different relative to each other, right? But when the second you say one is better than the other, you're assuming a standard of best that this society is closer to. And so I think we need to focus a lot more on this language of moral epistemology versus moral ontology in these debates and push the atheist and say, look, your theory it's not getting outside the realm of epistemology. We need an ontological foundation. And so this is my challenge to any atheist watching this video, is at the end of the day, regardless of what your theory of morality is, regardless of even if you think, say, the God of the Bible is immoral, or any particular God of a particular religion is immoral, that's not what we're talking about here. Regardless of your theory, if there is nothing outside of human opinion or what we think about this, then how is morality objective in any sense? How is it not just human opinion? And so, well, for example, this is one of the things I find admirable about Cosmic Skeptic, Alex O'Connor on YouTube, is because he's taking the position that morality is relative, that there is no such thing as objective morality. He recognizes that on his atheistic worldview, that there it just is no such category as morality. And you can take that position. I'd really actually like to debate him on that, because I do think there are good arguments that morality is objective. A lot better arguments for it than have been made by most apologists. And so I'd like to debate him on that. But anyway, that's my theory. And maybe I'm putting too much thought into it, right? Maybe it's a lot simpler than what I've outlined in this video. But anyway, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. Please share it with your friends if you think it's worthwhile. And I'm actually going to do a part 2 to this video. I'm going to do another video, and it's going to be specifically about Jordan Peterson, because specifically he had an event with Matt Dillahunty. And if you know anything about Jordan Peterson, you know it can be hard to understand what he's saying about God. But if you look at the event he had with Matt Dillahunty, he sounded very much like a Christian apologist. I don't want to put that label on him, because I know he doesn't like being labeled or boxed in. So I'm not at all putting a label on him. But he sounded very much like a William Lane Craig putting forth the moral argument. And he actually put forth a really sophisticated form of it, which is that atheists behave as if there's God. And so I'm going to get more into that in the next video. But even in the debate after Jordan Peterson put that forth, Matt Dillahunty almost immediately strawmanned it during the Q&A. And then Sam Harris appeared a little bit later on Dave Rubin's show, The Rubin Report, and he strawmanned Jordan Peterson. And so this video is going to be Moral Strawman Part 1, and then that will be Moral Strawman Part 2 when I talk specifically about how they strawman Jordan Peterson and why they're wrong. They're just simply not understanding what Jordan Peterson is putting forth, and they're taking a very unsophisticated understanding of this question. But anyway, so that's it for this video. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Follow me on Twitter @StellmanSmith, and I'll see you guys in part 2 of this video. Thanks.